Hey, and welcome back. Okay, I know it's been a while since I posted, but life has been super busy. I've been doing as much flying as I could and working on this guy, getting it ready for covering as much as I could. So, it's finally ready to cover, and I just wanted to give everybody a little quick tour before I get it covered up of some of the modifications I've done and how I decided to kind of lay some things out. So, I mentioned before doing a big electric on this. This is the same power system as what's on the Slick 76 inch. So this one will come in heavier than the Slick, so it won't do flat vertical 3D stuff, but it'll pull it around great. So one of the motors they really like on this quarter scale Citabria is the Quadro 42, which drives a 1810 prop at 7200 RPMs, and I've measured this on the Slick. So 1810 prop spinning at 7100 RPMs, so this really should pull it around great. So I cut out the motor mount and the firewall for cooling, so tons and tons and tons of cooling. I know I've mentioned it before, but here in Florida cooling is super important. So it's got plenty of cooling for the motor, the batteries, all the electronics. So this one's electric, so I made the front hatch. Front belly will be removable, a lot more cooling, plenty of space for the big 6S 4500 that I fly the Slick with. So shouldn't have any issues with power. I'll start this one off with probably a 6-minute timer, which is what I have on the Slick, but I don't think it'll use nearly as much power. Great big 9-foot wing and almost hardly any weight difference. I added my pilot door, which I thought turned out great. It's kind of not super scale, it's more of a standoff scale type of a door, but it'll allow me access to the wing mounting system, and I can show you that here in a second. Switched out the aluminum gear for carbon fiber, got the fiberglass wheel pants on it, right down here. So one of the things I really liked about the Slick and the way Pilot did it was they did a ring cowl. I think it really looks nice and clean. So this one I decided I was going to try to do a ring cowl. So I've actually got that part started. Still need to do some cutting on it, and right now it's just taped in. Actually training the fiberglass. When the fiberglass shipped in, it got deformed just a little bit and doesn't want to fit on really well. But after I get some training to it, it should fit fine. And I've got this wired up for lights, so this will get a nice landing light right in the front. But I'm not going to finish this up before the maiden. So one of the things I've talked on the forums to a couple of guys about is on this Citabria, in the plans it doesn't mention any right thrust or down thrust for the motor, and that's true to scale. The real ones aren't, but they go through a large portion of their flight is in cruise mode, so it's straight flight. You don't need the offset. But for our RC, we like to put some offset to help fight with P factor and help it fly straight when you're on and off the throttle. So with the bigger Citabria decathlons, the census was about 2 degrees of right thrust. So I have a washer under one side right now that gives me about 1.5 degrees. So I'm going to see if that's enough or not enough, and then once I get that thrust figured out and lined out, I'll end up epoxying in the ring into the cowling so it fits on nice and looks good with the slight offset. So that'll be later. I'll end up, when I'm maiden this, I'll end up putting just weights on the front to whatever the cowling's going to weigh, just to get me a good center of gravity. The The struts on this worked out really well. I actually had a buddy that unfortunately crashed a quarter scale cub, and I was able to reclaim the struts off of that cub, or at least most of the hardware, and then I had to customize it. So this front strut is actually the rear strut of a cub, and the front strut is super thick, way too thick to be scale, and way too thick, too heavy for this airplane. So I repurposed the rear strut to the front, and then modified the hardware to fit this other aluminum aerodynamic shaped tube to make up the rear strut. And then I had to remake my verticals there. But it does make it a folding strut, which will be super convenient when I'm trying to take it in and out to the field and make up a wing bag for it and all that stuff. Got my nice big lights in the wings, so I've got my green navigation on this side and a flashing white, and on the other side I've got red and flashing white. I did the freeze style ailerons on this, so it actually has a portion that dips below, if it would focus nicely, but so that should help with the differential. I shouldn't have to have as much differential to do rolls. Since this is an acrobatic airplane, this is how the scale ones are, to help fight some of that. And to do that, I ended up doing pin hinges in the end. So all this entire length is not hinged, just the ends. So inside of here is a carbon fiber rod that runs the length with titanium pins, and then I can actually remove this pin. So I can remove a screw, slide the pin out, and the entire aileron will drop out. So for covering, I'll end up using that, and if I ever need to work on it, it'll be nice to have that. Brushless, digital, high voltage servos, so super great performance. These are the same ones in the Slick. So again, all this is redundant for that system. So one of the things I modified on the kit was I added the window. So this is the scale window that the pilots, as they're learning their aerobatics, can look through the wing when they're doing loops and rolls to get their reference to ground. And that wasn't part of the kit, but I modified this to add that in. I thought it was a great feature. And then I converted from the aluminum and wood tubes to all carbon fiber. So this box became super strong, so there's no worries about this ever folding or giving out or any of that. And then I have a single wing bolt here, so as the wing slides in, single wing bolt to keep this nice clean open look. Then to continue that, all my wiring, I have it routed through the wing, down and into a little hidey hatch here. So I created a little magnetic hidey hatch, and that's where all my wiring will plug in. So both lights on both wings and the servo, I'll plug in there, and then I can just slide the hatch right back on. Boom. Top navigation light is there, and then I ran everything, all my wiring behind a back wall. It's not really a scale back wall. The way the canvas is run inside the fuselage for the passengers on the scale Citabria is different, but I did want a place to actually hide all this wiring. So formed a deck on the top and on the back, so everything runs there down to my receiver, servos, all that stuff. And then I also added this little magnetic shelf just to cover it up, so I can remove it, and I've got all my electronics there. If I need to change a servo or rewire anything, I can get to it pretty easily. But just when I'm sitting at the field, I'll have this shelf in place. that will get back in there and magnetically hold itself in place, so you just don't see it. So, little back wall. This is the way I decided to do my antennas. I was trying to really get them out and clear of any wiring. I thought about putting one on the back wall, but I thought it's really close to that wiring. I got lights and stuff in there. So I decided to do them at 45s from each other, cross body. So I got one that's way out here and then one that's all the way at the bottom. So that should give me plenty of signal without any issues there. On the tail, I was able to pick up this super scale looking wire rope to stabilize the tail, and I put it all in where the real one has it. The kit calls for this to be quarter dowel rod, but I think this turned out great. But one thing that concerned me about it is hard points that I could screw it down. So in here, what I decided to do is I cut out the balsa, put in plywood as a hard point with blind nuts, so that screws in there. And then where it goes through on the elevator and the rudder, I buried a piece of carbon fiber tube right there. I thought about putting in basswood or some other hardwood, maybe even stacked plywood, but then it hit me that I could bury a piece of carbon fiber. That would create a nice round hole for the screw, and I could tighten it as much as I wanted to, and it would never be an issue. So you can't even see it here, but these three hard points back here have carbon fiber tube run under them, so that those will never be an issue. I've got my pretty scale looking tail wheel with the little leaf springs. That should work great. Seems to hold the tail up fine. No issues with too much flex or anything. Got my rear navigation light, which worked out great. The lights are super bright when it gets to be dusk. All the shaping on the tail. So this starts out as just square 3/8 inch sticks, and spent a lot of time shaping to get that aerodynamic shape, but I thought it turned out great. Lots of cooling down here in the bottom where the antennas are, so as everything flows over. So one of the things that changing the slick, I added a hole similar to this with a little scoop on it for the slick to make sure it stays cool. And I look at my data after flights, and I'm at most, the motor is 10 degrees over ambient. So having a big cooling hole in the back really helps the motor, all the electronics, all that to stay cool, especially summers here in Florida. I've got my light controller under there. There's a coiled up wire up here that will actually run to the nose for the landing light and the cowling when I get ready for that guy. Again, I got my window over here. It worked out great. A little magnetic catch, so it'll stay open. So at the field, I can just kind of have it open and chill. Again, carbon fiber rods that run into my center section rods. So that should be more than plenty of strength, especially with the struts. If I pick it up by the wings, there's just no issues with anything. And then on my servos, I decided to actually solder in these connections so that I would never have to try to get to them, plug them, unplug them, make sure they weren't getting corroded. So these long leads shouldn't have any issues with those. Coming out. Again, nice big aileron. On all of the horns on this, I went away from what the kit said to use the screw on. I actually picked up Pilot fiberglass decathlon control horns. I just like the look so much better than having a big square on top with screws sticking out of it. So those shouldn't be an issue. I've got the ones back here. This will have a pull system on it, and then the elevator will work together off of one side, and should have plenty of throw. I ended up with both of my servos up here, so the rudder to the rear and then elevator to the front. That's for weight. They say on this airplane you just really have to build the tail light and everything else works out. So I tried to keep the tails light as I could, but I mean, I'm a little bit different being electric. I've got the big battery sitting up here in the front, and that should give me lots of balance. For my maiden, I haven't done a CG on this yet. I've kind of done some just general CG, and I should be somewhere between 1/4 of the cord to 1/3 of the cord. And according to who you ask on the forums, they like the different balancing. So I think I'm going to start mine a little bit aft, more of 1/3 of the cord. That's what the plans call for Bud Nosen. So I think that's going to be my initial shot at doing it, is 1/3. I can always put some expo on it for the first couple of flights. Not sure if I'm going to use this prop for the first flight. I did set it up to be that way, but I may go to a Zor. The scheme on this will be white, red, and blue, mostly white, red. So I'm thinking about maybe getting the Zor that's white with the red tips on it. I think it would just look great on here. So that's kind of the nickel tour before I get her cleaned up, dressed up. I gotta do a lot of painting on the strut system, which if I did not get to that before the maiden, I would be okay. I'm kind of really planning on doing what I call or think of as an ugly maiden. So things aren't done. Not all the trim will be on the wheel pants. They may be painted, no cowling, but it's been such a long process getting this together. I really want to just get it in the air, get it proven, and then I can do all kinds of dress up and clean up to it. So, yep, that's kind of the nickel tour. Hopefully the next time you see her, she'll have her dress on. She's been named Miss Molly. My wife wanted to call her something else, and I thought, no, she needs a nice, really nice name, so it came down to Miss Molly. So next time you see her, hopefully she'll have her dress on, ready for the show. All right, guys, happy flying.